evening and welcome. You are listening to CU Immigration here on WRFU LP Urbana 104.5 FM. I will be your host for this evening. My name is Mr. Garza, and I am here to let you know that WRFU is an open forum for the Urbana-Champaign community. I'd like you to understand that views expressed are those of the speakers, and I would further like to illuminate you and share the intelligence that those views are not intended to represent WRFU, UCIMC, or the Urbana Socialist Forum, or, as we like to say on the TV version of this show, UPTV. These views are our own, and by our in this instance, I mean myself and two guests who are going to introduce themselves. You'll probably want to hold that microphone sort of karaoke style up by your mouth so that we can hear you speak. It doesn't have a switch, just, right about there. You can lean in just a touch, and if you would be so kind as to introduce yourself, that would be great.
Hi, I am Kyoung Park. I'm from South Korea. I am a senior in urban planning major in University of Illinois.
Aha.
Hello, my name is Roman Yanke. I'm also a student here at the University of Illinois in urban planning as well. We're both seniors here. We're in a senior workshop, UP 478 for those of you who care, community development.
Community development. That's funny. Coincidentally, we just had two people from that very course last week on this show.
Mm-hmm.
Ha ha ha. We're pretending that it was actually last week, when in fact it was just a couple minutes ago. Anyway, that's very interesting. So are you doing the same thing they were doing?
We are working as a team. A lot of the field work we're doing, so it's basically the whole process of this goes identifying immigrant-owned businesses in the city of Urbana, and we're giving the specific parameter of downtown Urbana. There are actually other groups working in Urbana, but there's one working on Cunningham, the Cunningham corridor, University Avenue corridor, Philo Road corridor, and I think the campus area that's still part of Urbana corridor. So our specific area is downtown Urbana, and we're are working with the two previous guests on this show as a cohesive unit. So all together now.
So urban planning, like, what is that exactly? I mean, what you're learning how to. Like, when I hear that word, I'll just say, when I hear the words, it sounds like I imagine people getting together in a room and saying, okay, we want a city, and we're going to put it here on this hill, so we need bring in the urban planners, and they're going to tell us how to lay out this. That's what I hear in my head. What do you actually do?
Putting my bias aside, I think urban planning is a wonderful major and wonderful career opportunity because it's really customizable. It really complements many other things that I guess the common person would think, like you just thought how urban planning is, how it's designed this city, and that is an aspect of it all. But urban planning can range from anything where you have a background in law and you can be in real estate. You can have a background in business and economics and be kind of like an economic developer at urban planning. You can be really artistic and do more urban design. You can be really good with numbers, and there's a transportation facet of planning, analyzing traffic data and road networks and how heavily traveled they are. And then there's the basic planning, kind of called land use planning, where you do the nitty-gritty planning of the city, like you mentioned before. So it's really whatever you want it to be. I think in that regard it's really cool, again, putting my bias aside.
Well, no, it sounds very interesting. It's just I can't get over these, like, I am from the generation who grew up I was born in the 50s, so I grew up with this idea of, like, the brave new future that we're going to design, and so I just keep thinking of these old educational things where, like, some guy in a suit would sit there over a drawing board and go, oh, well, let's put the factory over here and the libraries over here. It just seems like this very top-down hierarchical, like, we're just going to design the city. But given how screwed up most cities are, whose word do you trust in the right way to do it? Because it seems like every city I've ever been to has some really big problem. That's like somebody somewhere thought this was a great idea to put the highway right through the middle of this neighborhood or something. And, it's like these are the same people that are writing your textbooks, I imagine, who are being cited as like, this is how they did it in Philadelphia, and here's how we did it in London.
Well, there's an aspect, I guess, to planning that's really important. That urban planners are advisors. We don't get to make the decisions. We advise people who get to make the decisions. So we take our knowledge in the field and we give our recommendation and hope for the best in a way.
Okay. Well, I'm just curious because I don't know that much about it, and
Well, it has a really interesting history. It's kind of been pushed aside in some eras, and I think, look at me being only a senior at urban planning at the undergraduate level, but from what I've gathered in my studies, that I think that urban planning is at the peak of its importance in a way, and I think it's really prevalent in city to city and is becoming a really essential aspect to city government.
Is it the same in South Korea? Or similar?
Yes, some part of it is like a similar of some part. But I guess I think the South Korea is more like hierarchy, like a more hierarchy level. So I think the government try to like demand some like of urban planning and also other like architectural company try to do it. Follow the government thing, so it's kind of like that.
Yeah, it would seem that the older the country, the more history it has, the more difficult it would be to make any kind of substantive change in any urban area, because you've got this inertia. It'd be like trying to turn an ocean liner. It's just kind of go, well, maybe in 50 years you'll notice that we're going a different direction, but you can't do big changes, in places that have all that history. Here, maybe it's a little easier because, there's nothing here, no civilizations, not civilizations, boy, I'm getting in trouble here. No cities that okay. This is what I was talking about earlier, about how when you start talking on the radio or on television, you can really find yourself going the wrong way and then realize I can't fix what I just started to say, because I was going to make it sound like there's nothing that's been here for that long, but there's entire civilizations that have been on this continent for thousands of years that have been stepped over and or otherwise pushed aside by the Europeans who came here, who have set up their own thing. So there's cities that go back. There's all this stuff, and I can't unsay that because I already said that, because I was thinking in a very Western colonized way. So I apologize to any listeners who are sitting there going, no, wait a minute, what about So anyway, I will step back from that. I will just say that I think it'd be a little easier in the U.S. to do some of this stuff because a lot of cities are just still evolving, whereas it might be harder in South Korea, where you're more tightly packed. Everybody's been there for thousands and thousands of years, and they've been doing what they've been doing for thousands and thousands of years, and it's a little harder to push them in different directions. Plus, you were saying it's a more hierarchical political situation than you have, whatever is good for the government, which isn't necessarily good for the city or whatever. So it just becomes very complicated. Do you feel like what you're learning here is going to be portable and you can take it back and use it, or are you just going to take the good stuff and see what you can do with it? Or
actually, when I learning urban planning in the United States, I find out some problems in South Korea. There are many public transportation.
Yeah,
I can choose a bus, subway, or around a residential house. But in here, many people using a car to go to shopping or fixing something like that. But I find out that there are many in the American village. There are many a park and recreation area. And also there are many in sidewalk for the handicap a person with a disability. So I like the kind of the facility.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Well, this is all of getting off track of immigration, but I was just curious to know more about urban planning because we spoke about it in the last show, but we didn't really talk about what it is or how it works or how you're going to do it. So in this instance, your project is to work with immigrant businesses, right? Immigrant business owners. Is this something, is that topic something you're interested in anyway for any particular reason, or it was just something that's assigned and so you've picked it up and you're just going to go with it? He's thinking.
Well, I know that I don't necessarily know for sure. As I was talking earlier about those different facets of urban planning, I'm not quite sure which one I'm going to end up in. I think that's to remain unseen. But I know community development, no matter where I go, is always going to be important because it's really intrinsically based with people, and people live in cities, which is obvious. So no matter what you're doing, if you're an economic developer and you're putting in a new strip mall or a new mixed-use residential commercial site, people are involved. So I think it was important for me to take this class in community development because it really kind of puts you in the field. And as we heard earlier, we're going to be talking with a lot of people, a lot of these immigrant business owners, and it's really kind of getting your hands dirty in a way instead of kind of reading out of textbooks and writing papers from the comfort of your own home. I mean, you got to go out and work. So I really like that aspect of this class, and I didn't know quite what I was getting into at first, but I'm glad how it turned out this way.
So as a professional urban planner who's actually doing it as a job, this is the kind of thing you would do in your job anyway. I mean, it's like, all right, you're assigned to go out and figure out what those people need. You know, I mean, you'd be doing this. This is part of urban planning. This isn't just some weird exercise in like.
Oh yeah. Especially if you're working in the public sector of urban planning. If you're working at the city level, from what I've gathered from talking with people who are already doing so, each day is different. One day is the same with what you're doing, and there's a lot of involvement with your community, going out and talking with people. So yeah, it is kind of replicated in that way.
Yeah. So this is definitely kind of getting your feet wet, so to speak.
Yep.
You know, or your hands dirty. I think it's the way.
Hands dirty, feet
wet. We're just
wet,
throwing out all sorts of things here. It's very easy to do. I become aware of that though. Whenever we have people from different countries, I'm always sort of somewhere in the back of my mind thinking of the things that I say and trying to think, well, how would this sound to somebody who knew English but didn't know the
that's funny, yeah.
You know, the slang expressions that we have, because I knew you would know exactly what I meant when I said that, but I wasn't sure you would have ever heard that before. And there are a lot of things that you say that I remember one day I was driving to Chicago or something, I was reading billboards, and I realized that if I knew English but I didn't know American English and I wasn't
like jargon, yeah,
I wouldn't understand maybe 7 or 8 out of 10 of the billboards that I saw, because some of them are people's names, some of them are just like parts of expressions that you would know if you knew the whole expression, you know, things like that. So that's got to be an impediment right there for a business person trying to start up a business in just how do you get across the language barrier? Like, how do you overcome that just to do what you have to do? I mean, you probably aren't going to be speaking only to South Korean businesses or to Korean businesses. How are you going to like understand what people are saying to you? How are you going to like bridge that gap? Or have you experienced that yet?
Like a gap. You mean like
just like how are you well, I mean, how, like on a day-to-day basis, it's probably difficult to follow some of what I'm saying because I speak quickly, right?
Yeah, sometimes.
And I'm not enunciating. Usually if I were thinking about it, I would talk more like this because that's easier to understand, right? But when I get going, then I start talking like this and blah, 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 you know, run everything together, and then it's just like, wait a minute, what did he say? You don't understand it anymore. So that's got to be a problem for immigrant business owners, right? The language thing.
Yeah. Sure. Like for the immigrants, like when I came to United States first.
Yeah.
Also, I have a hard time to understand the English because I think the learning English and like listening and talking English is very different. When I come to here first, I thought that they are speaking very fast.
Yes.
So I think that also immigrant owner has a hard time for their language barrier when they come here for first time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's also interesting. What you got me thinking when you're what you just said, that if you go and approach an immigrant business owner and you consciously realize, all right, maybe there is a language barrier, so I'm going to slow things down a bit. What if you offend someone by almost baby talking them in a way? So that's, I guess, another issue that could almost offend them if you're not careful. Even though our intentions are good, you never know.
Yeah. Well, there's so many potential pitfalls or landmines or however you want to put it in terms of dealing with someone whose background or expectations you aren't already familiar with. That is the upside of culture, I guess you can say, or working with a common culture or people assimilating to that common culture, is that everybody kind of knows instinctively how to get along. They may not want to, they may not care to. I mean, even within a culture, you still have people who are like, I don't care about the rules, and they're rude or whatever. But at least they know what they're supposed to be doing. So for example, that if I'm being rude to you, I know I'm being rude, and you can kind of build that in. But there are a lot of situations where, if someone is from a very different culture, you don't necessarily know if they know, and so it's like, I don't know how to behave towards you. I have no idea how to react to what you just said to me. Was it a joke? Were you being serious? Is that sarcasm? Because sarcasm is definitely one of those things that's like very difficult to identify, because it's just a very subtle version of the same thing that you might say it in a serious way. So I would think that could be really troublesome. For example, I mentioned in the last show that I have a friend from Japan and do this Japanese radio show with her. And one of the things that she was telling me, that's at least in Japan that is a very common thing, is that people don't tell you no very directly. They don't just say no. They say, well, maybe, I'm not sure. It's almost like it's rude to just say no. No, I can't do that. I won't do that. And so learning to read the various shades of maybe is a whole process that anyone from Japan would already know how to do, and they go, oh, that just meant no. But somebody that's not from there would be like, oh, was that maybe? Was that a real maybe, or was that kind of a maybe, or is that really not a maybe at all? Is that an Asian thing or a Japanese thing? Is that specific to Japan, or is it like a Korean thing as well?
I think it's specific for the Japan.
Mm-hmm.
For the Koreans, the Korean culture, the people speak like directly, I guess, compared to the Japanese culture.
Oh, okay. Huh. So that's very different. Yeah, I'm just professing my ignorance. I know that, for example, a lot of cultures from like the Mideast, in terms of like money, they don't do banking in the same way that we do banking here, and so they rely on networks, personal networks, for financing and things like that. So I would think that all those things could be difficulties that an immigrant business owner might face when they came here, that you wouldn't know how to ask about. I guess that was a long way around coming up with the question, how do you know what to ask them? Are you just going to go in there with just, here are the 4 questions we're going to ask, and then just give it to everybody? Or are you going to kind of tailor it to each person and see, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, as a class, we've kind of progressed over these past few weeks of finalizing this kind of list of questions of information that we find pertinent to our project. So we have a general list of questions, and I know when it comes time to talking with these business owners that you're probably going to stray away from a format that you originally have, because you just kind of want to have the conversation be more natural. But I feel like the field work, it's important that you kind of, if I know we have a limited time, only one semester to do this, it's important to build a relationship. And I've gone into stores and maybe purchased something and talk with the owner a little bit before you kind of dive too deep into, hey, what's going on with your business. So we will take in a list of questions and hopefully get the information that we can from them. we're not going to be too prying, but we are looking to get something out of them. So hopefully they comply. But it's their right not to. And,
oh yeah.
And if someone came and started prying questions at me, I don't know if I would always if it opened up my doors to them fully. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, it should be really interesting. At least you'll get to meet people and find out stories. I guess stories are always interesting to learn. How did someone get here? How did they end up picking this particular spot out of all the different spots? You said or at least in the last show, boy, I'm having trouble remembering who said what here. The last episode of this, you said that you're going at this as if your client is the city of Urbana, right? So you're trying to gather information as if you're going to turn it over to the city and say, here's what is needed or could be done better or whatever. Is the idea to define an immigrant-friendly community, or just define the ways that Urbana is? Are you trying to build a positive or identify a negative? I guess is what I'm saying. Are you trying to see what can be done to make it great, or are you trying to point out the problems that are making it bad?
Both.
Okay.
We identify the immigrant-owned business owners. We go and talk to them, get as much information as we can. We look at the structure Urbana has with dealing with immigrant-owned business owners. And then we will make recommendations or derive our own recommendations of what we see the problem areas, or we see, wow, Urbana is actually doing a good job with this. So it's more of, I guess, a detailed observation. We're kind of dissecting what we see here in Urbana and just going to make our recommendations. So if we go to all these business owners and they say everything's great, I can't believe the support we have here, this is excellent, then that's great, and that's what we would tell Urbana, and keep up the good work. I'm sure that won't always be the case, so we'll uncover those issues and go from there.
Are you going into this with a sort of a theory that you're trying to prove or disprove? Like, my theory is that Urbana is doing a terrible job, and I'm interested to see how this plays out. Or my theory is that because from talking to people, I understand that they're not really trying very hard. You know what I mean? Do you have a thesis that you're going to try to?
I don't think I can speak for all my team members or KJ here. I thought I didn't really have a hypothesis or thesis of what I was going to uncover. I looked at it more as it will be something that over the semester I'll find out what I was supposed to find out. So it's open-ended in a way, because you don't know how the business owners are going to react or what information they're going to tell you or the stories they might have. So no, I don't think there was any pre-identified thesis of any sort.
Yeah,
Did you think there was something, KJ? Yeah, I don't.
That's where I would differ. I guess I'm not a pure scientist in that sense. I already have an idea that I think they're not doing a very good job, mostly because they don't know. And I think this is good that someone is going to go to the trouble of figuring it out and telling them. I don't think it's like a ill intent or anything like that. I don't think there are very many communities that are doing much of anything. I think the campus does stuff just because they have so many foreign students coming through here year after year that they're like, okay, we have to deal with these people somehow. So let's identify like a cultural house for them, and let's give them these services. And they have a system in place because they deal with people all the time. But I think the cities, particularly like Champaign and Urbana, are just clueless.
I think you actually nailed it from what we've gathered so far, and what I won't dive too deep into what other groups will probably come and tell you.
Yeah.
In our same class is we've conducted interviews, ours personally with the Urbana Business Association, and the other groups covering the different areas I mentioned earlier. I've talked to other people, and it is, I think, an issue of we're just unaware. Or, yeah, there's, like you said, there's no bad intent involved. Mm-hmm. It's just we don't know. We don't have the facts. We don't know what is what, who is who, and there's just a gap.
Because the first big wave of immigration in this country was all through very specific points. It came well, of course, the first wave were the Europeans coming over here in the first place, but then they kind of established themselves, and then there's been successive waves, but they all pretty much like came through New York, you know, or they were very specific areas that they came through and then kind of funneled out from there. So those cities, those entry ports, had their own system for dealing with immigrants and their own like traditions for how they went about, whether it was good or bad, whatever it was, they had a system in place for how they dealt with, like, oh, you're one of those, so you do this, and we deal with you in this way. But I think by the time people filtered out here to the Midwest, it was like they were assumed as having already been assimilated to some degree, and they were just like, I don't think that's part of the history of the society around here, to deal with immigrants in any kind of way other than like, okay, maybe you get your own church, or or
I'd agree with that, yeah.
or your own restaurant or something like that. But I don't think there is that is part of the culture in these smaller towns out here. So I would be interested to see what kinds of things you come up with, because I think it should be very interesting to see how people run up against that sort of benign complacency, like just, or benign neglect maybe is what it is. It's just like, well, you're here, you're supposed to know what you're doing. I shouldn't have to tell you anything because that's not my job. My job is to provide these directions. I gave you the directions. It's up to you to figure it out. That's, I think, the bureaucratic mindset in this area. So I'll be really interested to see how that's working for people.
Yeah, if I had it my way, I'd love to hear from everyone who we talk to. Well, how'd you end up in Urbana? Because it'd be interesting to.
Are you going to ask that kind of personal question, or is that too weird?
When the time is right, hopefully fit it in there. I'd like to know. It kind of fits into what type of information we're trying to gather. So
it's just a casual question. I mean, you could just toss it in there. It's not why Urbana. Why not Champaign?
True. Yeah.
You could ask it like that, because Champaign is noted for being more business friendly in terms of their tax structure and things like that. Someone's trying to contact me. Anyway, we're rapidly approaching the end of our time. Is there any other points that you guys wanted to make before I let you get back to your life?
I think we covered a lot of ground. Yeah, that was good.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate your coming here and sharing your information and your expertise with us here on the show. We like to talk about immigration, but we like to sort of talk about it in a holistic way, as opposed to just a legal thing or a social justice kind of thing, because immigrants are people. I mean, everybody's people. Immigrants are people from somewhere else, and that's kind of a point that we like to get across to the listening audience, because I think a lot of people, as I was mentioning around here, are just not familiar with the difficulties that immigrants have. They don't understand it because they just never really thought about it. And so they are as much a part of the problem as anything else, because they're just thinking, well, you're here, so you must know what you're doing and you must know what you want. I'm not going to, I shouldn't have to do anything. That's not my job, So I think the more people understand that immigrants are coming here for all sorts of different reasons, but they're just people like everybody else, I think it will help everybody learn how to get along and take some of the mystery out of it for people. Anyway, you have been listening to CU Immigration here on WRFU LP or UPTV, depending on which direction I'm looking at any given moment. I'd like to thank you for joining us. We will see you next week with some other interesting thing, interesting topic, interesting guest. Thank you both once again for being here, and everybody else, we'll see you next week.